Hello and welcome to Rock Paper Shotgun. If I'm sounding a tiny bit croaky today, it's because I failed to wear my gas mask to a Metro Exodus preview event and picked up a horrible cold from a diseased games journalist. Thanks for that. On the plus side, I've played 5 hours of Metro Exodus, exploring the new summer region and a bit more winter and autumn, and I like what I see. It's a really interesting take on sandbox shooting that brings the attention to detail of a corridor shooter to a more open world, and here are a load of things I loved about it. 2 things before I start. We are limited to using B-roll, which doesn't contain the coolest stuff we saw, which is a shame. And apologies for that dreadful beta gameplay message in the corner. Also, if you want to help heal me, please do press the thumbs up to like the video. For every like I get, my bosses give me 1 hall soother. My life is literally in your hands. Now, onwards.
The car went that way. Be careful out there though. We don't know what to expect from the locals.
My favourite description of Metro Exodus was when creative director Andrei Prokhorov described it as an accordion, in the way that the world can be very narrow and compressed in one place and then stretch way out in another. I'm assuming this is a metaphor and the game doesn't literally go wah, wah, as you enter big and small areas. And nowhere is the game more stretched out than the new summer region, where I spent most of my hands-on time. For those unfamiliar with the story, Metro Exodus charts a transcontinental journey across Russia over the course of a year, with different seasons aligning with the different open world areas you encounter. In the summer, your train, which is called the Aurora, pulls up in this vast desert, which has more than a hint of Mad Max to it. I mean, if you had your Michelin I Spy Mad Max book, you'd be raking in the points. Look, I spy bandits with skulls attached to them, I spy some sand, I spy a general assortment of rust, I spy more sand, I spy cars made from random bits of pipe and maybe an old umbrella. It couldn't be more Mad Max if Tom Hardy suddenly turned up and mumbled something incomprehensible. More importantly, the region is big enough to justify a drivable vehicle, which is a first for the series. Elsewhere in the game, you get to slowly paddle a rowboat, but that's apparently not exciting enough to include in this B-roll. You mustn't expect anything too flashy from Artyom's new set of wheels. It's more rust than car, but it is good for splatting mutants on the windscreen. Sadly, this is all the B-roll we have of the car, so you'll just have to trust me when I say that it is most satisfying watching limbs slurp down your windows. Metro's desert offers a different flavour of apocalypse, where you might associate the series with the nervousness of what might creep out of the gloom. The desert can't really rely on these tricks. It's a lot more upfront about the threat. There are bandit gangs that cluster inside buildings half drowned in sand, or legions of these baldy bastards, who are the nastiest thing to pop out of the sand since I stood on a dog turd on Great Yarmouth Beach. The level seems more action-focused than the other areas. That's partly down to more bandits dropping more ammo for you to shoot other bandits with. And it's also thanks to the kindly engineer aboard the Aurora who gives you incendiary ball bearings for your pneumatic rifle. All this together and you can almost feel the designers willing you to go a bit crazy after hours of careful, responsible survival. This isn't to say it just turns into rage for a handful of blood-filled hours, although it certainly reminds me of id's sand-filled shooter. Metro Exodus is never just a shooting gallery. Part of 4A Games' outdoor shift is to offer a freedom of approach, and not one limited to sneaky or shooty. With the right weapon customizations, you can set yourself up as a long-range assassin, for example, using cranes or tall ship rigging to rain death on skulls below. You could alternatively travel down the zipline and take people on close quarters, or just find an entirely different route along the ground. To me, this is how an open world shooter should behave. It's still a carefully scripted encounter, not randomly spawning enemies and hoping that the magic will happen, but the expanded canvas lets you pick your angle of attack, even if that angle is hiding in a tower like a baby with a sniper rifle. Of course, in other ways it's not as big a departure. Sandstorms step in for deadly gases, forcing you to hide inside your gas mask to avoid choking, and further limiting your view on already clouded firefights. And once you get into the facilities lost under the sand, you'll find plenty of horrors waiting for you, but more on those in a second. Going back to Prokhorov's accordion, which incidentally would be a great name for a philosophical principle, I find that Metro's individual areas themselves do a really nice job of expanding and retracting to fit your given goal. A winter level set in a waterlogged railway yard, for example, uses stretches of water full of mutant fish to break the map into smaller areas as you get your bearings before bringing you to a high-up scouting point, handing you a pair of binoculars and inviting you to tackle the rest of the map in the order you see fit. Even then, I love the rhythm of getting from A to B. When you hit a more open marsh in that train yard, for example, you suddenly become very aware of mutant beasts patrolling the area. You might want to slink off to a workshop where sleeping in a bed lets you jump between day and night to see if one setting offers more of an advantage. You see, in the day it's much easier to plot paths around radioactive bears or gangs of raiders, but then you won't benefit from the shadows either. But even in the area's more linear parts, like here where you're joined by your AI companion wife Anna, you're invited to leave the path and nose around inside old train carriages or abandoned shacks for crafting parts or a little bit of bleak environmental storytelling. You won't find many skeletons pulling comedy poses a la Fallout. It's not really Metro's vibe. At times, Exodus reminds me of the approach taken in the rebooted Tomb Raider games, or the excellent Evil Within 2. They're small sandboxes, but handcrafted to the last pixel. You won't just find a generic shack model with a spread of even more generic loot. For starters, the designers are quite careful to keep you relatively starved of materials, so that it works as a survival game, and everything feels very carefully doled out to keep you hungry. This is particularly felt in the autumn stage, the Tiger, which, for reasons unknown to us, strips Artyom of most of his gear from the outset and forces you to scavenge your way back to strength. Here, you're constantly looking out for caves and crannies hidden in cliff walls, hoping for weapon mods to stretch your ammunition further, or just some chemicals to craft more first aid kits. It never becomes a shapeless quest for junk. I'm looking at you, Fallout 76. But it treads a fine line between scale and specificity, which is an extraordinarily difficult line to tread. Let's stick with that handcrafted vibe for a moment. The thing that most impressed me in Metro Exodus is the way the game still delivers the tense, scripted level design you associate with Metro. So often, open world sandbox becomes shorthand for, find your own fun. But you can always sense 4A's hand on the steering wheel. This can be something as simple as an interesting building filled with cunning enemies to take down. Very early on in winter, you find yourself sneaking around a church of anti-technology zealots, the kind of maniacs who wouldn't see your train as a force for good, like Thomas the Tank Engine, but a work of twisted evil, like Thomas the Tank Engine's jerk friend Henry. I'm glad you got bricked into that tunnel, you villain. Anyway, sneaking around their sacred buildings, snuffing out gas lamps to create pockets of darkness, with that little light bulb on your wrist telling you when you are unseen. It's just good old-fashioned exercise in stealth design. You can craft decoys or throwing knives, or pause to attach a silencer to your pistol. 4A were good at this stuff in the previous Metros, and it has that same aggressive heft here. Oh, and I really like the bit where the cultists surrender after I thinned out their numbers. That's a lovely, lovely touch. Skip forward to autumn and you can see that same attention to level detail in an assault on a network of tree houses claimed by the Children of the Forest. As a side note, I adore the idea of this faction. The level was once a summer camp, but when the parents didn't come back to pick up the boys, because they were all melted by a nuke, those kids grew up to be a survivalist gang. The mix of violence and imaginative make-believe would be quite endearing if they weren't trying to murder you constantly. Watch this handy B-roll wizard smoothly dispatching guard after guard, and you can see how much more crafted it feels than, say, Bethesda's identikit caves and corridors and their crude crouch-to-stealth mechanics. I also really love the reappearance of Metro Last Light's spider bugs in a set piece that takes place under the desert in dark corridors leading to a communication centre. Spider bugs are vicious, light-resistant spiders, meaning your torch is your most powerful weapon. A weapon that is gradually running out of batteries, forcing you to manually pump it back up with a hand generator. You can use the beam of light to try and shepherd the eight-legged freaks out the way, or pin them to the ground and deliver one fatal kill. Yes, it's an idea returning from the previous game, but it's the perfect example of the kind of change of pace that Metro Exodus handles so well. For a survival game, Metro Exodus is also surprisingly generous in the way that it lets you recalibrate your hero on the fly. Okay, so character customization pretty much boils down to what guns do you want and how do you want them, but that choice is cleverly delivered with Artyom's magic backpack. Sling it on the ground with a press of a button and you're able to quickly alter your weapons. A drop-down menu lets you slip through alternate grips, barrels, sights and chambers with grace and speed. The game doesn't pause while you're fiddling away, but it's so fast that it is a viable option to tinker with weapons in the field. If all hell breaks loose and you want to dump the silencer for some extra hurt, you go right ahead. And changes aren't just simple stat nudges, some can radically change the behaviour of a weapon. A shotgun with a 3-round cylinder behaves very differently to one with a 10-round magazine. Likewise, your Tickar, a pneumatic rifle that has to be hand-pumped to shoot ball bearings, can be adjusted with an automatic air system that automatically reloads it, but only to a reduced capacity. Or you could opt for the airtight build that prevents it from losing pressure when you pump the cylinder to max pressure. It's a rare game where I quite look forward to stripping parts from dropped guns, just to see if I can create a sexier toy. And it all comes back round to feed into your choice of approach. Happening upon a cluster of enemies and being able to build a stealth loadout rather than trekking back to a safe house to deal with a massive stash of loot is freeing and encourages more experimentation. It's just a very neat system. In all honesty, 5 hours is only really enough time to properly dig into one of Metro Exodus's regions, let alone 3 of the things. I love all the little zip lines that whisk you around the map. Who built these things? Did they intend to turn the nuclear apocalypse into a kids' adventure playground? Whoever did it, they managed to build them in wonderfully cinematic spots, so good job them. And I love 4A's continued dedication to a HUD-free world. Everything you need to know is there on your wrist. A timer ticking down to your L filter running out, a radiation meter, and a tiny compass pointing you in the right direction. I love that the map is a physical item that you have to hold and spin in your hands, putting you at risk of monster attacks while you try to work out which bit of this hellhole to visit next. And I love that the map isn't covered with bullshit icons that turn every game world into a tedious checklist of locations to tick off. In fact, I love that the game resists all the trappings of RPG character development. Nothing would kill your immersion quicker than XP markers popping out of a shot mutant bear. Metro Exodus's character development happens entirely in the junk you hold in your hands, which is kinda how it should be. I wanted to talk about the characters we met on the Aurora, but again, I've not got the B-roll for that, so you'll just have to trust me that they seem like a good gang while you watch this footage of an abandoned school. I like the idea of growing to know them as we trundle along. A year is a long time and there's lots of potential here for neat relationships to develop. I'm also intrigued to see how it all looks once Nvidia's magic ray tracing is added to the mix. Metro Exodus will be using the lighting technology to light the levels with physics-enabled sunbeams, which sounds rad. I mean, the game looks suitably gorgeous without all that jazz, but it's good to know someone is trying to use the tech for something. More than anything, I just want to sit down and play the game from start to finish. A lot of its story didn't come into any kind of perspective because we played out of order, and I didn't have the time to play the levels at the pace they're intended to be played at. Also, someone spilled some mac and cheese on my bag, which kind of took me out the moment. I hope you've enjoyed this quick tour through the novel open worlds of Metro Exodus, and sorry that we only had B-roll to show them off. If you stuck with me all the way to this bit, many thanks. Your reward is that I invite you to ask any questions you have about the game in the comments below, and ask you to kindly subscribe to Rock Paper Shotgun for more great Metro Exodus videos in the coming months. We may even have our own capture. Imagine that! Thanks for watching, and hopefully see you soon. Bye for now.